what Trump is going to do, what he is doing, and what he will do, these are all things that were going to happen anyway, with or without him. He's just the one who's selling it to you as a good thing. That's his job. You know, he's like the guy at a company who's designated as the one to deliver the bad news to you that you're going to be let go. And you designate him for that job because he has a way of presenting it to you. He has a way of presenting to you, you being fired as the greatest opportunity of your life, you know? All the new horizons that you're going to be able to pursue and so on. That's Trump. That's Trump's job. You know, America has been stuffing balloons up their sleeves for a very long time and telling everyone that they're muscles. But now even the balloons are deflating. The great American hoax is over. And Trump is there to oversee the dismembering of American empire. The U.S. is going to be isolated, it's going to withdraw, and it's going to be non-competitive globally. And like I said, this is all unavoidable. This would have happened with or without Trump. You've simply come to the end of your life cycle as a hegemonic superpower. And the decay and the decomposition that will follow is just part of the natural process.
What's up, YouTube family? Welcome back to my space. This is Ivan Strayola. Guys, thank you so much for tuning to watch this episode. I do not take your support for granted. So guys, on today's video, we want to talk about the downfall of America and specifically talk about how Trump is overseeing this downfall. Family, whatever Trump does today, whatever he plans to do tomorrow will not change, you know, the wrath that is yet to face America. America is yet to face a lot of degradation, you know, and Trump is just but an overseer of this downfall. To speak to us today is Shahid Bolsen. Shahid Bolsen has a lot of critique of Donald Trump, and he centers on the view that Trump's presidency epitomizes and accelerates America's decline, both domestically and globally. Bolsen argues that Trump embodies culmination of systemic failures and ideological shifts that have eroded the nation's democratic foundation. So guys, I wanted to watch this video of Shahid Bolsen explaining this phenomenon. Once the video is done, we will get back and do a critical analysis about the same. Let's watch this together, family.
What Trump is going to do, what he is doing, and what he will do, these are all things that were going to happen anyway, with or without him. He's just the one who's selling it to you as a good thing. That's his job. You know, he's like the guy at a company who's designated as the one to deliver the bad news to you that you're going to be let go. And you designate him for that job because he has a way of presenting it to you. He has a way of presenting to you, you being fired as the greatest opportunity of your life, you know? All the new horizons that you're going to be able to pursue and so on. That's Trump. That's Trump's job. You know, America has been stuffing balloons up their sleeves for a very long time and telling everyone that they're muscles. But now even the balloons are deflating. The great American hoax is over. And Trump is there to oversee the dismembering of American empire. The U.S. is going to be isolated, it's going to withdraw, and it's going to be non-competitive globally. And like I said, this is all unavoidable. This would have happened with or without Trump. You've simply come to the end of your life cycle as a hegemonic superpower. And the decay and the decomposition that will follow is just part of the natural process. Trump can't be blamed for that, and he can't be given credit for any of this. But his job is to make you think that none of it's happening, even while it's happening right in front of your face. This is what Trump's main job is. Because look, for example, drill, baby, drill, right? Make America energy self-sufficient, et cetera, fire up all of the dormant oil wells and so forth in West Texas and so on, while simultaneously asking OPEC to lower oil prices, which of course means asking OPEC to increase production. Okay. The way that goes is increase production by OPEC, and if they do it by the US as well, okay, then the oil price drops, and cheap oil floods the market, out of sync with demand, driving the price down even further. Now the price is too low for it to even be profitable for American producers to drill, to refine, or to extract. You understand? American oil producers need for oil to be at a minimum of $40 per barrel for it to even be worth it. For it to even be worth it to drill and extract and refine and so forth. Meanwhile, OPEC can still make a profit at just $10 a barrel. So you understand, America cannot play the oil game with OPEC. OPEC has the capacity to ramp up oil production if they want to, anytime they want to. They can ramp up oil production. They can increase production to a level within just 90 days that America couldn't reach even in 5 years. In other words, OPEC can decimate the American oil and gas sector anytime they want. The only reason they don't do that is because they want to maintain price stability for their own benefit, for their own reasons. They would rather have oil at $70 a barrel or $100 a barrel rather than $10 a barrel. So they choose to allow America to stay in the game. And that's the only reason. But if you're going to ramp up oil production on your end, well, then you better hope that OPEC responds by cutting production on their end just to stabilize the price. Because if they don't, if they respond in kind and they do what you do, and they also ramp up oil production, and then they drive the price of oil down to their minimum profit level, well, that will nuke America's whole oil industry. Plants, drilling sites, refineries, all of that's going to shut down. Tens of thousands of jobs will just disappear overnight. And for every one job in the oil and gas sector, there's at least 2 or 3 jobs that are indirectly related to that. So you were looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of jobs lost by drill, baby, drill. Not to mention, when that happens, no one in the private sector is going to invest in the oil sector anymore. So you see, no more exports to Europe, no more exports anywhere, no more oil exports, energy exports. Meanwhile, you're going to abandon renewable energy, clean energy, and so on. The Green New Scam, as Trump says, he's very much against that. And at the same time, you have the UAE and you have Saudi Arabia investing hundreds of billions of dollars in the U.S. In energy-intensive businesses in the United States. I mean, Trump said it himself. If oil companies drill themselves out of business, I don't give a damn. That's what he said. So you see how the rhetoric, how the marketing actually sells the opposite of what the policy outcome is actually going to be. I don't think for a second that Trump doesn't know that. I think he knows that. No one who's putting these policies in place doesn't know what the outcomes will be. And that's why the policies are being pursued, because they want to achieve those outcomes, those very outcomes. But you can't sell that to the electorate. You can't tell the American people, you know, we, your private sector overlords, are no longer tied to the success or the prosperity or the stability of the American economy. We have global interests, not national interests. And so we've decided to drive the U.S. into energy bankruptcy as quickly as possible. And maybe then we can sell all of America's oil and gas assets to Saudi Arabia or to China or what have you for pennies. You can't tell the American people that. So instead, you say, Trump says, we're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill, you know, better, stronger, faster than anyone. We're going to produce more oil than anyone else in the world, and so on and so on and so on. We're number one, you know, and everyone cheers. Everyone applauds while the oxygen is being drained from the room. And let me tell you, that's exactly what's going on. The last time Trump was in office, Saudi Arabia and Russia collaborated to flood the global oil market during COVID-19, no less. And the U.S., under Trump, the U.S., the media, portrayed this as a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. But it was transparently done. It was transparently undertaken by Russia and Saudi Arabia, specifically to undermine the American oil sector, the American oil industry. It completely crashed the oil price, making oil production completely unviable for the U.S., for U.S. producers, okay? Trump had good relations with Russia. He had good relations with Saudi Arabia, still does. And I think it's fair to say that this was a 3-way collaboration, not just between Russia and Saudi Arabia. Trump was involved. And now Trump already wants to do it again within his first week in office. I don't think OPEC is going to go along with it, to be honest. Not right now. Why should they? You said drill, baby, drill, so you go ahead and do that. You go ahead. You drill. But we are not going to initiate a crash in the oil price. We need the money right now. We have projects. So you have to take Trump seriously, but never at his word. Never take him literally. But do take him seriously, because he's a mascot for a faction of power that needs to be taken very seriously. The A-National OCGFC, owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They're essentially the real unipolar superpower of the world. And Trump is their hatchet man in America. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be very good for the Muslim world. Generally speaking, it's going to be good for the Muslim world and the global South more broadly. Yes, it is. But I know that things are going to get very hard for you in the US. Things are going to get very hard for you in the West overall. Now, most people around the world, in the global South, they'll react to that news the same way that someone would react to hearing about a serial killer getting shanked in prison. You know, he had it coming. That's how most people feel, to be honest. But I know that most people in the West already have it hard. I know that most people in the West are actually already suffering. And I know what it's like to live in America. It's not easy. And I know that just because the consequences that you may suffer may be the result of your own actions, that doesn't make the consequences any easier to endure. I know it's going to be hard, especially when you're suffering the consequences of actions that were taken by your elites, not necessarily the actions of the common people. So I know this is hard to take, and it's going to be hard to take. Now, again, let me reiterate, this is not about Trump. It's not about Trump. The isolation, the degradation of America was going to happen anyway. It had to happen. This is just the necessary course of the logic of Western predatory capitalism. Just like Gorbachev wasn't really the one who destroyed the Soviet Union, he just oversaw the inevitable destruction, self-destruction of the Soviet Union because it had run its course. America has run its course. And when I say Western predatory capitalism, those adjectives are important because it's not even really about capitalism in and of itself. It really mostly has to do with the culture and the civilizational peculiarities of the West. They don't act like that because of capitalism. Their capitalism acts like this because of the way they are. You understand? And in fact, it's because of the way they are, that they even approach capitalism, trade, and so forth, and business the way they do. Their particular version of capitalism. And it's because of them, and because of the way they are, and because of their approach to capitalism, that the A-National OCGFC even are a thing. And it's also because of this that their own societies are now on the chopping block. It's because of the way they are. But that's a topic for another day. The point is, this is something that has to happen. It's something that has to happen. It's something that had to happen. It's something that will happen. And it's going to happen, no matter what. No matter whether it's Trump or anyone else. Anyone who says, for example, well, that's what you get for voting for Trump, you know, or you should have voted for Harris. Well, I mean, you're so thoroughly indoctrinated and participating in the deception and the deflection of that system that you yourself are just as much a cause for the collapse of the United States as anyone else that you blame for it. You know, you created a class of A-national elites, oligarchical elites, whose private profit interests are no longer connected to your own economy. You did that. They're not connected to any productive activity. They're not connected to any nationality. They're not connected to your standard of living, not to your stability, not to your safety, your prosperity, your success as a nation or anything. And that class of private sector powers became essentially a nation unto themselves, like I've said many times. A nation that transcends borders. It transcends national interests. They don't have any interests except their own interests. You created that, and you celebrated that, in fact. You still celebrate it, never realizing that they would inevitably sacrifice you for their own profit interests, the same way that they've sacrificed millions of people outside your country. You know, you created this psychopathic class of predators. And you expected them to never bite the hand that feeds them, even though the hand that feeds them has always been feeding them hands, you know? Now they can't tell the difference between the food and the feeder anymore. It's all just flesh to them. You can't raise a wolf on human flesh and expect him to distinguish between the human you are feeding him from the human who is feeding him. Eventually, he doesn't see you as his master or his owner anymore. He only sees you as food. Well, you raised a wolf on the flesh of the global South, and it turns out you taste just the same. Yes, wolves don't care if it's dark meat or light meat. They'll chew you up either way. Look, for decades, the military-industrial complex, the MIC, in America, it was a towering giant in America, in the U.S. It was the driver of the economy. They shaped policies at home and abroad. But today, there's a decline in its dominance, and that's been coming for a while. It's no longer the sole engine of the American economy. It's no longer the most important engine of the economy or the global economy. Now, this change wasn't due to any great moral awakening or some newfound sense of conscience. No, it's the result of systemic shifts within the American economy, popular fatigue over endless wars, corruption and fraud within the military-industrial complex, and of course the rise of the A-National OCGFC. The U.S. economy has diversified. I mean, decades ago, in the 50s, say, weapons and military technology was central for America's economic growth. But today, other industries, technology, finance, obviously healthcare, and so on. It surpasses that. And of course, globalization shifted the focus from building tanks and jets to dominating digital platforms, international markets, and so on. Then came the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War was the big shift when the Soviet Union collapsed. You know, then the supposed existential threat that justified the immense military budgets and spending and so on, that disappeared. That threat disappeared. I mean, you tried to come up with new threats, terrorism, war on drugs, what have you, but none of these threats really could justify the scale of investment that was needed to keep the military-industrial complex, influential. And like I said, the public became tired of wars in the 2000s. Iraq, Afghanistan, it drained the American public, emotionally, financially, politically, and people began to question the wisdom of pouring trillions and trillions of dollars into conflicts that only ever resulted in spreading chaos and destruction. Not to mention, you have rampant fraud and corruption in the military-industrial complex. You have overcharging, you have magically disappearing funds, that were handed over to defense contractors. They've misplaced enough money. The military-industrial complex, defense contractors, have misplaced enough money to house every homeless person in America and educate every child. They charge so much for one weapon that China could probably build a dozen for the same price. I mean, if the military-industrial complex has been the vehicle that carried the American economy, well, it sure isn't a fuel-efficient vehicle. It's a gas guzzler. And of course, you can barely get anyone anymore in America, young people, what have you, who are willing to put on a uniform and fight for this money laundering scam. That's all it is. That's all it is at this point. I mean, you want to send your sons and your daughters to go die in a foreign country for Raytheon? That's what they're doing. They're not fighting for democracy. They're fighting for General Dynamics. Well, nobody wants to do that. How are you going to convince anyone that they're fighting for democracy 6,000 miles away from their own crumbling neighborhood in New York, and their neighborhood is crumbling because all of their tax money is going to Lockheed Martin? You can't convince people to fight for that. You can't. So then, because your pool of soldiers is shrinking, then you have to start changing your approach to killing and carnage. You have to start changing your means of destruction, because you can't really do traditional warfare anymore. You had to develop new technologies, which means that the demand for conventional weapon systems, which the military-industrial complex was based upon, that's given way to focus on drones and cyber capabilities and artificial intelligence and so on and so on and so on. So the MIC hasn't disappeared, but its form and its scale has changed. And part of that, too, is because America started moving manufacturing overseas, globalization and so on. And in order for the military-industrial complex to really maintain its importance, well, domestic manufacturing was key. Domestic manufacturing was key. But pretty soon, more and more companies were keeping their toothbrushes and their shampoo in somebody else's house. And you know what that means. America went from being the wife of corporations to being the side chick. See, again, because you had to change how you go about killing people, rather than learning how to get along with people, you had to come up with new technology, and that new technology depends upon electronics, which means rare earths. Well, we're talking about private corporations, talking about profit-driven corporations, so all they care about is money. All they care about is low-cost acquisition, and China flooded the market with cheap rare earths, which caused the market price to plummet. And that put rare earths mines out of business. You see how that works? Just like I was talking about with oil. So now China controls about 80% of the world's rare earths market and 90% of the processing. Think about that. The American military is completely dependent upon Chinese rare earths. You talk about confronting China, but they can shut you down in 3 seconds if they want to. So this is what I mean. You literally created this situation for yourselves, and it has nothing to do but play out now. It's inevitable course. It has to just play out. You gave private enterprise absolute autonomy, absolute supremacy, and that included sectors within the military-industrial complex. Your MIC-driven ideological obsession with the Soviets led you to engage with China, and then China opened up, and then you very quickly became dependent upon them. And they have surpassed you to a stunning degree in manufacturing and in technology. And now you can't even make a drone without China. You can't even make a drone. And you need drones because you don't have soldiers. You see? You've been doing nothing for decades now but cultivate your own demise. It's really quite poetic in a way. And in this whole process, like I said, your rich, your companies, your elites are increasingly untethered from your national interests. And now they're floating above the stratosphere, the stratosphere of global financialized capital, and they're looking down and they see America as just another landmass, just another population to be pillaged. And so, as the MIC recedes, other factions have risen in prominence. At the forefront, of course, is big tech, which emerged from the military-industrial complex, like companies like Apple, Google, Amazon, and so on. These aren't just businesses anymore. Those are oligarchical political powers. They dominate global markets. They shape cultures. They influence politics. They influence politics in ways that the MIC never could even have dreamt of. I mean, they control the flow of information. They control communication. They're gatekeepers of knowledge and power now. They're massive. And then there's, of course, financialization. This is very important. The financial sector not only shapes economic policy, but it exerts immense political influence as well. I mean, the 2008 financial crisis showed us that Wall Street's too big to fail. And since 2008, their grip has only expanded and tightened. I mean, even those tech giants, Google, Apple, and so on, a huge amount of their wealth is actually due to financialization, not sales, not ad revenues. It's through financialization. It's basically fake money. Then, of course, there's the healthcare and the pharmaceutical sectors. Big pharma, it's massive, and obviously incredibly influential politically, as we all saw during COVID. Okay, these are all a-national, along with things like construction and mining and so on, subcategories. And they're all corralled together. All of these diverse business interests, they're all corralled together in asset management firms like BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard. Those three companies constitute what you could call universal owners. They don't operate according to any one country's interests. They don't operate according to any one company's interests. They operate according to the combined interests of international economic sectors. They're the first C in the OCGFC, the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They're the controllers on behalf of the owners of capital. And they have the reach, and they have the portfolios, and they have the power to coordinate and to orchestrate economic planning across the globe on behalf of the vast array of investors. They control literally trillions of dollars. And they're connected to sovereign wealth funds around the world that gives them influence and access to trillions more. They dwarf the military-industrial complex in this regard, particularly since the primary source of money for the military-industrial complex is the American government.
Family Shahid Bolsen is one scholar that I really like listening, because he has a lot of facts at hand whenever he starts up a conversation. And this right here is just but one of those conversations that I've been longing to listen. And he spoke really nicely, and he said that the downfall of America, was just but a matter of time. And Trump is just but the president who's overseeing, this downfall. And this downfall must happen. And we're already seeing America's downfall in many ways. Right now, when you look at the presidency, when you look at the president of the United States of America, you'd start asking yourselves a lot of questions. The latest one being the altercation online between Donald Trump, and Elon Musk. These are things that do not happen every Tuesday. These are things that happen rarely. When you see a leader take it on X and start fighting, that just shows you the erosion of the leadership. That just shows you how the country is starting to fall, because the leader of a country, the president, is a sign of unity for that country. Just like the national anthem, presidency, having one leader, is just but a sign of unity for the country. So for a country to fall, for a country to face its downfall, we start seeing whatever we are seeing right now in the US. The leader of the United States of America for the first time is having an argument online, on X, time and again, after every hour, getting back to Elon Musk. That just shows us that in a way America is slowly falling. When you look at other things like mass deportations that have been perpetuated with the same leadership of Donald J. Trump, you wonder what is happening in this country. You know, this very same country is now sending ICE officials to houses to hunt down illegal immigrants. But the funny thing is that at the same time they are arresting even the legal citizens of this country, permanent residents. That just shows you again that there is something that is off, you know, with the leadership. And remember, the scholar in the video mentioned and emphasized that Donald Trump will just be used to oversee this downfall, and he says that that will happen. That is inevitable. You know, that the downfall of America is a must. According to Bolsen, America must fall down. And we wonder, you know, what are some of the ways that would cap this? He says that it must fall down, and we are seeing it with the leadership. We are seeing it with the president as the sign, you know, of unity for this country. And this just brings a lot of questions, you know. What do we expect next? Because we are seeing drama after drama. The other day we also saw President Donald J. Trump questioning the president of South Africa, you know, in regards to the allegations, you know, of killing white Afrikaners, the genocide attempts in South Africa. And we saw the president bring false evidence. Some of these photos that he showed on that day were photos from back then, according to CNN, you know, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, people, there is a lot of questions, things that have never been seen done before. You know, a president come up with false evidences, false videos that would otherwise ruin the relationship between two countries. You know, there's just a lot that is happening right now, you know, in America, and that just shows us how the downfall is closer and closer. In summary, Shahid Bolsen views Donald Trump's presidency as a pivotal moment in America's decline, characterized by the erosion of democratic norms, the normalization of extremist ideologies, and a retreat from global, you know, leadership. He argues that these developments have set the stage for a more authoritarian and fragmented society, challenging the nation's foundational principles. Family, you can tell how America is declining, characterized by the erosion of democratic norms. You see what the president is doing, the normalization of extremist ideologies. Some of these ideologies that are being pushed right now just tells you that, yo, things are not getting better anytime soon. We're also seeing some Americans cry on TikTok, complaining over high tariffs. You know, people are complaining over the high cost of living. We've seen some people also starting to live, you know, in storage units. People being arrested in storage units, people saying that it's actually cheaper living there than living in a home with ventilation and windows and water, toilet and all this stuff. They say housing is very, very expensive right now in America for an average citizen. So as we're speaking right now, America is in the verge of falling. And as you heard, you know, from the speaker in the video, you notice that this is just but beyond repair. Guys, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about today's video. Kindly like this video so that it can be recommended to other YouTube users, and I'll be very, very grateful. Thank you guys, and see you all in our next episode. And before we leave, kindly do consider subscribing to the channel. We are currently on the road to 50,000 subscribers, and guys, we cannot do this without your support. Kindly share this video widely with your friends and family. Thank you, and see you all in our next one. Goodbye.